Hi everyone, my name is Suresh Sivaprakasam. I work in Adobe as a group product manager, as Alejandra just introduced. Let me start quickly with an introduction about myself. So I took a scenic route to becoming a PM. I have over 20 years of experience and almost 10 as PM. I have an MBA from UC Berkeley, and then I had done my undergrad in electronics engineer. But before becoming a PM, I've worked in a variety of roles such as sales and consulting and strategy and biz ops and in product management now. And I took the meandering route, but I feel all those experiences really helped me become a good product manager. And now that I'm leading a small team here and I've hired and mentored product managers, I feel I could share some frameworks and mental models that might be helpful for a new PM as well. And even though this is targeted at a new PM, I feel anybody who's aspiring to be a PM or in the process of interviewing for a PM might use some of these frameworks that I'm going to share to understand the opportunity or the company they want to interview at. So I'll just dive right in. So let's say you got the job. It's a start of an exciting journey, and many of you are starting your first job as a PM. So I'm sure you guys have a lot of energy, and you go meet the team, meet your hiring manager. You have your first one-on-one. Your laptop is set up, and there's a lot to do. So as a product manager, where do you begin? The role itself, as you might have heard, is extremely cross-functional. Uh, you get a seat at the table for all these aspects of the business. You don't just build the product, but you are kind of part of the strategy, go to market, opportunity sizing, monetization, feature price, name it. Every aspect you would be touching. So since you're doing that and you come in with this high energy, if you don't have a mental plan, an idea of where the challenges are and what are the most important things, you could be very busy, put in a lot of hard work, but if you don't have that clear mental map, you might dissipate your energy and not have something to show. So what I'm going to walk you through is a couple of frameworks, nothing revolutionary, but it might be helping you navigate. So I'm using North Star as a navigational aid. Sailors, when they started as an analogy, I'll use that. They would kind of first look at where the North Star is. That's one navigational aid that helps them assess how far they are from their destination, what path they might take. They obviously had other tools as well, like what are the landmarks if they're close to the coast, what's the birds' migratory paths, currents, and many other tools. So just like that, you also would have some navigational aids. The first one that you should be thinking about is what's the maturity of the industry you're in? What stage it is in. Is it an early emerging industry, growing, mature, declining? And each of them tend to have some attributes of where they are. Is it like the Wild West when it's emerging, the laws are not clear, like some of the privacy rules every year they're getting updated, or it's something very stable like the utilities business where it's just stable, there's no disruption there, it's going on. And the stage of the industry defines what your role of the product manager and where your opportunities are, what you would be driving for. And most important is where the customers are. So to the right, it's a well-defined marketplace. There's a lot of transactions happening. Customers are already spending on these products and solutions. You're going to be offering your product there. But there is a spectrum, there's a range. You might offer a premium offering there with some additional features. So there's a difference there versus on the left where customers themselves are unclear. Can we buy this? Do we have to build it? Is there a solution for it, or do we throw bodies at it? That's where they are. They might not even know, what's the value and what's their willingness to pay. So it's not clearly and crisply defined. So you got to kind of take a step back and look at where this company and industry that you're going to target are lying. The next dimension that to think about is the technology. So again, this is another S curve. I have three different models here, but they're all illustrative. You don't have to stick to any one different model here. But let me just quickly give you a high level introduction if you're not familiar. On the left is something called the Gartner Hype Cycle. This is something that Gartner publishes for a variety of domains like AI, or databases or any specific domain, they have this hype cycle of where the technologies are. It could be in the far right, which means it's kind of stable and well established, or it could be in the far left. It's just coming out of a research lab from university and people are excited about it, but it's still a decade away from being commercialized. So that's one view. The Bass diffusion curve is another view of that. It's kind of similar if you kind of squint back and look at the industry maturity. This is about adoption of the new technology. How quickly does it get adopted? Like if I were to give the example of smartphones, Apple innovated, came up with a new smartphone in 2007. Today we are at about nearly 4 billion smartphones worldwide. And it's not all of it is Apple, but there were quick followers who came up with their own smartphones. But world population is 7.8 billion. So that's the diffusion curve, how long it took for the technology to penetrate and capture the available opportunity. So those things are kind of indicators of how mature the technology is and whether you can build it as part of your solution or what your differentiator is going to be. If it is very early and emergent, it could be unstable. You have a learning curve. You could be introducing additional risk, and you might need to buy more time to understand it before you can kind of master the beast and create a solution that solves the customer's products. On the right is one more, which I found interesting. NASA has its own technology readiness levels. So obviously they're sending astronauts to space, and it's a mission critical launch. So they don't want to risk. So they have this scale as well, which is really interesting. They have to be in the top end of the scale before they will go into their spaceship. So those are some 3 different frameworks to assess and kind of think about how far along are you. So when you build a solution or a product, there'll be many layers in that stack. There'll be one piece which is kind of the secret sauce, which is going to make a big difference in what your product is going to do for your customer, the additional value that others are not offering. So if the major piece is one of these technologies, you got to make sure that it's kind of well established and stable, or if it's kind of early stage, then you need to plan and mitigate that risk. So those are the second dimension. The third is what's the maturity of your product. In here I'm kind of showing products on the y-axis and customers on the x-axis. So the customers on the x-axis is kind of borrowing a little bit from the other industry maturity, but I came up with this 4 quadrants. So what it means is that you could join as a product manager in a new company, but it could be an existing product. They're already selling, there's already transactions happening. So your role here is very different from somebody who's trying to launch a new product. Here you're trying to grow the customer, their share of wallet, because they're already having contracts with existing customers. If you think of yourself as joining as a product manager for Microsoft Office, and you're launching one more app within the Office suite, everything is already in place in terms of who's buying, how much are they paying for it, how are they going to get it, how are they going to discover your product. Everything is well set. What you're trying to do is kind of bring awareness, drive additional units or value to the product that's already being sold. You could also say that adding this one additional app has given additional value, so maybe we could optimize it. Maybe we could come up with a plus version or a premium version of the same bundle. That's what you're trying to do on box 1. As you move to the box 2, which is existing product but new customers. So this is you're lost in North America or tier 1 markets. You're trying to expand to other geographies or other languages or any other dimension that you could think about, like verticals or industries. It's the same kind of product, but they have some additional requirements or unique requirements. But 80% of the product is already there. You are just trying to expand and localize and capture that additional opportunity. Going back to the other ones, which is the new product, which is a little bit rarer, but it does happen often enough, where you're trying to bring new products. It's existing customers. You join a company, they have a large portfolio of products. You're building a net new product that doesn't exist now, but you already have the existing customers. So the customer relationships, the industry, the problems you're solving all is there, but you're bringing in one net new product. The role of a product manager is quite different in this. Of course, the 4th quadrant is the hardest. where you're building the new products and you don't know who the customers are. You got to acquire them, you got to make them aware. So number four would be the hardest. So again, this is just another perspective. So I'll just pause here and kind of refresh what I walked through. First one was the industry maturity, how far along they are. Uh, then the next is the technology maturity, how stable the technology is. Is it already available? Are you the early adopter? Is every other product already using that technology? Those are important things to consider. How comfortable your engineering is with that technology as well. And third is your product and your context. So those are the three frameworks. But I think the fun part of it is combining the three, which is uh, put the three together to size how big or small the challenge is going to be. This is a three-dimensional matrix. I've flattened it out in this table here, where industry is on the left, technology is the second one, and product is the third one. Creating new industries with a new technology and coming with a new product is very rare. You could argue this is kind of a illustrative example. I've gone way back to printing press and steam engines here, because in net new, the publishing industry wasn't really there. There was no scale there. The transportation industry for goods wasn't really there before the steam engine came around. Uh, but if you define your industry much more narrowly, then maybe you can say new industries are created, every few years. But in my opinion, if you take a broader view, it's pretty rare. But the key point here I want to make out is, new industry, new technology, new product is going to be super hard. At the other end of the spectrum, existing industry, existing products, and existing technology, where pretty much is stable, it's well established. I've not put small effort in terms of t-shirt sizing here, I still put medium here. And the reason is because as a product manager, you'll still be challenged. You still have to provide value to your customers. They still have to pay for it. They still have to like the product. They still have to kind of, if it's a subscription, renew and all of that. So none of it is easy, but the degree of difficulty is different as you go from lower tier to the higher tier. And at the same time, I would also say that you should not, if you think of it as three legs of the stool, you should be kind of starting with innovation in just one aspect of it. Most likely, most products that I've seen are innovating on the product angle. Some are using existing products, but under the skin, there's new technology like AI is being introduced as an innovation in many new existing products and categories. But the customers are well established. So you should not try to bring in two new dimensions like industry and technology. That's going to be super hard. So try and limit the risk and exposure that you have. But more importantly, the point that we started off with is, as a product manager, what do you prioritize and what you focus on in the first 90 days? If you have this kind of understanding at a high level where the big challenges are, that's going to give you much more of a focus. You're going to do the introductions and meet all the people and have all the meetings, but you would know, which ones are more important, which ones do you need to be thinking about, when you have your downtime or time for yourself. And that's going to give you some kind of north star or directions to where you invest in time and energy. That's about what your upfront challenges are, and this is something that you can do before you start your job, the first week you start a job, or even when you're even interviewing. This might be a handy tool to kind of get prepped on the company and the opportunity that you're discussing with them for. The next big thing I would like to focus on is the metrics, which is there are a lot of numbers, but there are some metrics which are more important, and more importantly, how you should kind of think about the metrics, like which one are the most important ones. So I like to use a customer journey framework, and this is something that was published in Medium by Columbia Road. I really like it. It's a little bit of an eye chart. Maybe later on you could download it and zoom it. But on the top, it's the customer journey from awareness, consideration, decision, delivery and use, loyalty and advocacy. That's a pretty standard journey. Every customer, regardless of whether it's B2B or B2C or B2B2C or whatever you frame it, it's a typical journey, but you need to kind of adapt it to your domain. And then on each of the rows, there are these swim lanes is what I call it. like what is the customer doing in each of these activities? And this is important to kind of expand your horizon. You might be building a feature, a UX, and what the engineering, and you might be deep into it, but kind of stepping back and thinking about the holistic experience of the customer is really important. Like for example, my internet is Comcast and Xfinity. uh, my opinion about Comcast is not just based on the bandwidth and the consistency I get, but also how I experience when I talk to them, when I try to get an appointment or make some changes. So it's not just the product; it's the full experience before. Where do they find what they should buy? How do they renew? So those are not really product issues, but as a product manager, you are kind of, as they say, cliched, CEO of the business. So you need to be fully aware. And then once you have this kind of a framework, you can think about what the customer's activities are, what are they really trying to do, how are they, what are the touch points and integrations that you have with them. Are they searching in Google, and that's where you need to be? Is there a marketplace where you need to advertise or build awareness? And then the experience part is kind of hard to fill out. It could be subjective here. It could be a part of your discussion as you work through teams. And meet the different folks to figure out what is our experience, how do we rank ourselves against our competition. So this could be a blank sheet of paper that you would start filling out as you work through your first 90 days. And then the business goal, that what is our goal here, what can be reasonably achieved, and what are the KPIs. And that's where I'll tease out about the metrics in the next slide. And then what are the activities you're doing, and more importantly, who's responsible. Like even though you're closely tied to each of these steps, there might be a VP of marketing who's responsible for building awareness and brand. So you need to know in their organization, are they really thinking about your product? Where does it figure into their picture? So like that, you need to walk through the journey. So once you have this journey, the next step is somewhat simpler, which is you list out all the potential metrics that you have. Like on the left, I have illustrated world population, and then maybe you're selling to businesses. So what is, and it's desktop software or mobile software for employees in a workplace. So what's the employed population? Or it could be students. So you need to kind of think of the universe and kind of narrow it down, and then what are the different other metrics when they're evaluating the product? How often are they searching for your products? What is the paid search, organic search, traffic, trials, pipeline? So there are dozens of metrics. You will not have them even at the end of the 90 days, but you need to think about all these and keep a kind of blank sheet and fill out as much as possible, so that you would know which ones are available, which ones are assumptions, and how do you go about finding proxies or getting at least a gut instinct for this. And I guess the more important part is to kind of identify a key metric for each journey step. Hopefully it's the last step, because that means if they've met some threshold, it's moved on to the next stage. But needn't be, there's no hard line. In every business, this could be different. I'm just using this as an illustrative example. And once you figure out this is a journey step, you need to kind of start figuring out where this data exists. It could be existing instrumentation, databases, reports, dashboards. How do you get access to it? Or third-party reports, or industry events, presentations, whatever. You need to be creative to understand where these are and how to measure them. Then I'll move to the third part of the presentation, which is basically the challenges. So we talked about doing a situation analysis on the maturity, which is maturity of the industry, technology and product, and how to prioritize. Then we figured out how to kind of think about the metrics and the three, using the customer journey. This part of the presentation is a little bit open-ended, which is based on my experience of mentoring and managing new product managers, of what they are surprised by. So these are things that you may be aware at the periphery level, but it can really kind of stall you if you are not mentally prepared or haven't had a clear plan for getting over those challenges. So the first part is understanding the role, which is a product manager is a very generic title, and titles across companies will vary. Even across the same company, the roles would be slightly different because the teams are different, people are different and unique. And people might be there might be an intern working in your team, and he's not really so familiar, or there might be a product marketing person who's partnering with you, who has a different view of what product marketing is. So and you got to partner with each other pretty closely, having a crisp understanding of what is it that you're driving and I'm contributing, what are you driving independently, and what is it that I'm driving, where the boundaries are, and how you work together is pretty critical. Because if you kind of rush through the process and don't have a clear understanding of what it is, then you might be kind of having blind spots where it's pretty late in the game. You're about to go to a launch, and some things haven't been thought through, and you got to push through the release date or some such issues. So have a good understanding, and this will also kick off a good one-on-one conversation when you're doing the introductions. Using this kind of a template will make you look very well informed and thoughtful of what's the best way to partner and make this launch successful. The next big thing I would say many project managers are surprised is the amount of consensus driving that they need to do. As I said, product managers seat at all of the tables, and but they also need to. That means convince a lot of the people. There are many places where you are kind of asking for resources, like building the business case. You're building the business case, you might be challenged for how is it not cannibalizing our existing offers. You're coming with a premium version, that means you're killing a bigger business. We don't know. Or you might be taking on too much risk by, it's a new industry, and you don't know about the customers, what they want, or the technology is unproven. So anytime you are introducing or pitching a business case, you got to hustle. You got to really sell and win over these approvers, because it's not, you might be the product managers, but there's a whole lot of other people, especially in larger organizations where things are pretty streamlined. There's prioritization that happens because there's only limited resources and there's infinite opportunity. People get pretty brutal about what gets prioritized, who gets the engineering team or who gets a release window. So I also call it the Hunger Games, because only the best folks are, the best ideas get funded there. So the way to work through this is to kind of start refining your pitch up the food chain, start at the bottom, understand, each of these functions, what their goals are, what their challenges are, what they will be looking for, and kind of work your way through the process. So there will be many different challenges, but be mentally prepared to put in, product manager's job is a lot of selling as well. And then this is another thing that's surprising. What I'm saying here is you don't have to be a data wizard. It's great if you are really good with data, but be prepared to kind of do a lot of data wrangling. The metrics, for example, that I talked about, even the best of companies don't have things very organized or streamlined. The lineage of customers across systems, or the ability to track an anonymous visitor to the website or in a searched window through purchase and post-purchase experience is really hard. So, and you're trying to draw the customer journey and what are the conversion rate and so on. So you have to kind of be mentally prepared to kind of stitch together a variety of data sets. You might have good partners, but you got to be ready to kind of, even if it's Excel or Tableau, whatever tools you're, those are not important, but the ability and the appetite to kind of wrangle this data on your own, because many times nobody's going to give it pre-packaged. I've seen some product managers who are new say they expected a report to say this, but it's just halfway there, and they got to clean the data and stitch it together. They don't know how to stitch it together or what IDs are there, or whether it's a full data set or not. So this does take a lot of time. So be mentally prepared to kind of get buried in data and wrangle with it. And then this is the last part here, which again people do get surprised. Which, if you look at the news in terms of all the privacy issues or data exposures, it shouldn't be surprising. There are a variety of laws and legal issues that are there that you need to, especially a tech product manager where customers' data might be involved, really need to be very careful. So finding out who your legal partner is, what's their process for approval, is really important. And the questions they ask are very fair. They are well versed with the latest rulings. Like California state has different rules and federal laws are different. And if you're selling in Europe or other markets, they have their own data requirements about whether the customer can delete, be right to be forgotten, and a whole lot of plethora of laws. You are not meant to be the expert here, but you are meant to understand and be able to explain to the legal person, where is your data coming from? What is your storage and management policy? What is your archival and deletion policy? What are the specific use cases and how are you using it? Like really need to be careful if you're going to kind of use some of this data to market or reach out, because there are permitted use cases and where the customers click through even though they might not read the terms clearly. They have not given you explicit permission things to what you can do with that data. So you really need to connect with the legal team early and understand how you would be using this data. So that kind of concludes my presentation. I'll just quickly summarize. So understanding the big thing first is to understanding the maturity of your technology, industry, and the product, and putting it together and comparing it where it stands with compared to your peers to understand what are the major work areas, where are your biggest challenges. If the industry or if the customer, your company is already selling products and solutions, there are existing contracts and you're just adding one more product there, it might be very easy. Or if it's a consumer who's already buying products and you're trying to sell one more add-on to it, it's somewhat easier because they already have a relationship. They might be subscribed or opted into an email. So you have a path. Versus where the other challenges are. You're trying to introduce AI. Where is the data coming from? How are you going to do machine learning and training of your algorithms there? So it could be slightly different. Or if it's a net new industry where customers, the rules are not clear. The customers where they buy, there's no defined marketplace. You have to reach out to them, find them, build your value proposition. So there's a lot of field work that might be required in customer development. So you understand where the challenges are going to be, because your product as a product manager is not just stopping at shipping the product, but making sure the product is successful as well. So you might have challenges in a variety of areas. So use these frameworks to prioritize. The next thing I talked about was the customer's journey, to use that as a lens to understand what are the metrics that you should be thinking about and what is the most important metric. There could be 1,000 different metrics. There are 1,000 different metrics and you can get buried in trying to understand them. But stepping back and looking at it from a customer's journey and a product manager's lens on it would help you prioritize and understand which are the most important numbers and where your blind spots are as well. And finally, we talked about the areas where you get stuck on. Many young product managers rightly think the idea or the strategy is pretty important, but there are a lot of places where you really need to hustle, whether it's driving consensus, wrangling data, getting through the legal thresholds. So you really need to hustle and work hard to make yourself successful and make sure you're shipping your products on time. So that's, I guess, some of the frameworks that I hope you guys find useful. Alejandra, that concludes my presentation.